In the silent corners of Asia's most modern cities, where steel and glass scrape the sky and smart homes whisper back to your voice, something ancient still lingers. Ghosts are not confined to temples, forests, or forgotten graves. Some live behind freshly painted walls, some speak through glowing touchscreens, and some knock quietly at 3:03 a.m. just to see if you'll answer. Tonight, on Ghosts of Asia, we enter a high-rise in Jakarta. Clean, efficient, secure. Unit 4D has no reported deaths, no official incidents, just whispers, just footage no one wants to talk about, just one journalist who walked in and never walked out the same. This is not folklore passed down through generations. This is not a story from the past. This is modern. This is now. And if you're watching this late at night, in a room lit by screens, you're already one step closer to her. This is the girl in Unit 4D. The city of Jakarta never truly sleeps, but up here, 22 floors above the hum of motorbikes and hawker stalls, there is only silence. Dira stood in the center of Unit 4D, the cool air from the central system barely brushing her face. Her luggage sat untouched by the door, and the scent of fresh paint still lingered. She had only just stepped in, yet something about the unit made her feel like she was intruding, as if she'd opened a door meant to stay closed. It was modern, spotless, too clean, maybe. White walls, marble counters, minimal furniture, a voice-activated smart system that promised comfort and security. But for Dira, it wasn't about luxury, it was about escape. She had come to Jakarta from Yogyakarta after everything fell apart, the job, the relationship, her reputation. A breakdown, the doctors had said. Burnout, hallucinations. She had left behind a shattered version of herself and come here with one goal: start over, quietly. Her new job as an independent culture columnist came with the freedom to write from anywhere. She didn't need a newsroom anymore, just her laptop and silence. And here, in this gleaming high-rise of glass and concrete, silence was in abundance. "System on," she said softly. A gentle chime echoed. "Welcome, Dira," said the automated voice, feminine and emotionless. "Would you like to configure your environment?" She almost smiled. It felt absurd, talking to a house. Still, she went through the motions. Lights to warm white, temperature to 24 degrees Celsius, music off. No need for distractions, no need for comfort, just a blank canvas where she could begin again. But as she walked into the bedroom and set her backpack on the bed, she felt it, that slight resistance in the air, the way sound seemed dampened, as if the walls swallowed her presence. She turned, looked back toward the living room. Nothing there, just her imagination. She told herself that again the next morning, when she found the hallway light turned on, even though she distinctly remembered turning it off before bed. The first few days were quiet. Dira worked from her balcony in the mornings, typing drafts of her next article on urban rituals and their erasure in modern Southeast Asia. In the afternoons, she made runs to the local mini-mart or strolled the concrete paths between the apartment towers. Everything in Angkasa residences was uniform, clinical, safe. Too safe. The neighbors didn't make eye contact in the elevator. Most stared at their phones, headphones in, even when the car shuddered slightly between floors. People in cities forget how to exist together, Dira muttered to herself one evening, standing in front of her bathroom mirror. We live above each other, not with each other. The mirror flickered,
only for a second. Just a glitch, she told herself. Smart glass mirrors have touch functionality, and sometimes they lag. But the air turned cold that night, even with the thermostat steady. And as she drifted off to sleep, she thought she heard something soft and rhythmic against the wall behind her bed. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow taps. Dira opened her eyes in the dark, held her breath. Was it the pipes or a neighbor? She waited, listened. Nothing. Only the soft buzz of the air system and the low hum of the city far below. She sat up, glanced at the clock on her phone. 3:03 a.m. Something in her chest twisted. The time meant nothing, and yet it didn't feel random. 3:03, 3 knocks, 3 breaths. She got up, walked barefoot across the cold floor, put her ear to the wall. Silence. The next day she brushed it off. Too much coffee, jet lag, stress. But that night it happened. Again. 3:03 a.m. 3 knocks. Always the same rhythm. Not rushed, not angry, just expectant. And her smart assistant said nothing. It had no log of voice commands at that time, no sign of motion detected, just a perfectly silent log, as if she hadn't even been home. She asked it to check again. Sorry, Dira, no activity registered. She frowned. Are you sure? Another pause. Then, child lock enabled. She froze. What did you say? No response. The phrase was gone. No memory of it remained in the system. She shut it down and slept with the lights on. By the end of the week, she had begun noticing other things, subtle changes. Her toothbrush moved an inch. The coffee canister turned slightly clockwise. Her folded sweater mysteriously crumpled. She tried documenting it, placed items in exact positions, snapped photos, made voice notes. But in the morning, the changes were always slight, enough to question herself. On the 7th night, she opened the front door after the knocks, heart pounding. The hallway was empty. Not a sound. Not a shadow. The air hung thick, unmoving. She closed the door slowly, turned to look at her reflection in the mirror across the room, and saw herself, smiling. She wasn't smiling. Her reflection was. She didn't sleep after that. The next morning, she sat at her kitchen table with coffee that tasted like ash and wrote her headline draft in bold. Urban myths in modern cities, ritual, silence, and the places we forget. She stared at the words for a long time, then typed another line beneath it. What happens when the ghost isn't in the house, but in the code?
The knock came again. 3 soft taps, not loud, not violent, just enough to pierce the silence and freeze Dira where she lay. She sat up slowly in bed, heart beating fast. Her eyes flicked to the glowing digits on her phone. 3:03 a.m. Again. The same time, the same rhythm, the same stillness in the air, as if the entire building held its breath when those knocks echoed. She waited, barely daring to breathe, listening for footsteps in the hallway, a door creaking, voices, anything that might make this explainable. But there was nothing, just the buzz of the lights and the dull hum of the air system, and the knock, 3 quick, calm raps, already gone, as if they'd never been there. She got up, slowly, and walked to the wall behind her headboard, pressing her palm against it. Cool, solid. The same empty silence on the other side. Her fingers trembled slightly as she whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. She moved to the front door and peered through the peephole. Empty hallway, sterile white, unmoved. Still, something in her chest refused to relax. She opened the door a crack, holding it with one hand. A rush of air brushed her skin, unnaturally cold for an indoor corridor. The motion sensor lights above blinked, just once, then nothing. She closed the door, locked it, and double-checked her smart assistant. "System status," she whispered. A soft chime. "All systems normal." "Front door logs?" "Front door closed since 2241. No motion detected." Her skin prickled. "Sound input?" "No anomalies detected." She hesitated, then asked quietly, "What time is it?" 3:03 a.m. She flinched. Of course it was. The next morning, she replayed the night's audio feed. Nothing but ambient noise. No knocks, no movement. Even the timestamp skipped from 3:02 to 3:04, with no interruption. She stared at the gap in the log like it was a hole in the world. Her system wasn't malfunctioning. It was refusing to remember. That thought chilled her more than the knock itself. Dira tried to rationalize it during the day. Maybe it was the neighbors. Maybe it was plumbing. Maybe it was construction vibration. But the knocks weren't loud like pipes or random like settling concrete. They were precise, deliberate. 3 soft taps, like a child knocking politely at a door. She started asking around. At the convenience store downstairs, she struck up casual conversation with the night shift cashier, a teenager with earbuds and heavy eyelids. "Hey," she said, "do you ever hear strange noises up in the tower at night, like tapping sounds?" He looked at her blankly. "You mean construction?" "No, like knocking, inside the walls." He blinked, then forced a laugh. "This place is weird quiet, miss. That's all I hear. Quiet." She left without pressing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in bed with her laptop open, scrolling through forums on haunted buildings and unexplained noises in high-rise apartments. Most of it was nonsense, pseudoscience, dramatics, prank videos. But a single comment on a local architecture board caught her eye. Old high-rises are often built over condemned spaces. When a room is spiritually closed but reopened for profit, the memory of what happened doesn't fade. It waits. It felt too specific, too pointed. She looked again at the username. Just a string of numbers, no profile picture. The comment had no replies. She bookmarked it anyway. At 3 a.m., she sat at her desk with her phone camera set to record, facing the wall where the knocks always came from. She didn't blink. 3 minutes passed, then it happened again. 3 soft knocks, muffled but clear, coming from inside the wall. She stood up slowly, walked toward the sound, pressing her ear against the plaster. Nothing. She turned back to check the camera feed. The recording showed her sitting, waiting, and then nothing. No sound, no movement. But her body in the footage reacted. Her head turned, her breath caught. She heard the knock, but the camera didn't. And just like before, the video stuttered between 3:02 and 3:04, skipping the precise moment the knock came. She checked the Smart Assistant logs again. Still blank.
But this time, when she asked what happened at 3:03 a.m., the device responded with something new. Child lock enabled. She stared at it. What does that mean? No response. Repeat last message. Silence. Child lock enabled. She whispered again, like it might trigger a reaction. Still nothing. Her smart home system had no settings labeled child lock. Not in the manual, not in the app, not in the developer menu. It didn't exist, and yet it had spoken. The following day, Dira went to the building management office on the second floor. It was a clean space, glass walls, with a receptionist who smiled too much and said too little. I wanted to ask, Dira began, trying to sound casual, about my unit, 4D. Have there been any issues with the smart system? What sort of issues? Logs missing, sound events not recording, strange automated messages? She clicked away at her keyboard. Let me check. No, everything appears up to date. We run diagnostics weekly. Any prior complaints from previous tenants? She hesitated. Unit 4D has only recently been open to leasing again. Recently? A few months ago. Renovations, new systems installed. Dira narrowed her eyes. Who lived there before? The woman's polite smile didn't falter. I'm sorry, that information is confidential. Did someone die there? That made her blink. I'm sorry, she repeated, more curtly this time. We don't comment on tenant history. Is there anything else I can help you with? Dira shook her head. No, thank you. She walked away with the feeling she'd asked the one question they never wanted answered. That evening, she scoured public records. Nothing showed up for Unit 4D. No deaths, no incidents, no previous owners listed by name, just internal lease transfers and maintenance holds. She broadened the search to local news, and then she found it. Not a headline, just a 2-paragraph filler piece from 5 years ago. A child fell from a high-rise balcony in Ankasa Residences Tower 4. The incident occurred around 3 a.m., with no witnesses. Police ruled it accidental. The mother was reportedly admitted to a private facility for psychological care. No charges filed. No names, no unit listed, but the timestamp, 3:03 a.m. Dira leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. She didn't believe in coincidences anymore. That night she dreamed of the hallway. Long, endless, stretching in both directions, all the doors locked, all the lights flickering softly. She was barefoot, holding a child's hand, though she never saw the face. The hand was cold, wet. At the end of the hallway was her door, Unit 4D, open just a crack. She heard breathing behind it, then a soft voice whispering, I never left. She woke gasping, and outside her window, high above the city, she saw a small handprint pressed against the glass from the outside.
Dira could no longer ignore it. Something was wrong with Unit 4D, and it wasn't just in her head. The knocks, the time, the missing recordings, the strange phrase, child lock enabled, the news article, the handprint on her window, 22 floors above ground. Every sign pointed to one conclusion: someone or something had never left this unit. She sat at her dining table that morning, fingers curled around a cold cup of coffee,
staring blankly at her smart assistant. Its circular LED pulsed gently, waiting for a command. "Tell me," she said aloud, "who lived here before me?" The light blinked. Then, "I am sorry, I do not have access to leaseholder records." Dira narrowed her eyes. "Search connected accounts for prior system users." Another pause. "No records available." She leaned forward. "Who enabled child lock?" Silence. "Repeat that response." Still silence. The LED faded. It had gone dormant, as if it was hiding something from her, or as if it had been told to forget. Later that day, Dira walked the perimeter of the building's rear maintenance area, a low-rise cluster of concrete painted in industrial gray. There, she found an older woman in a faded janitor's uniform, sweeping the stairwell near the delivery entrance. Her skin was darkened from years under the sun, and her eyes had the kind of quiet that spoke more than words. Dira approached gently. "Excuse me, I live in 4D, and I was wondering if you've worked here long?" The woman glanced up, then nodded, without stopping her sweeping. 10 years. Why?" Dira hesitated. "Have you ever heard anything strange about my unit?" The sweeping stopped. The silence was sudden, heavy. The woman looked up fully now. Her voice was low, careful. "Which tower?" "Tower 4. And you said 4D. Dira nodded. The woman's eyes darkened. "No one has asked about that room in a long time. So something did happen?" The janitor leaned on her broom, looked around to make sure no one was nearby. Then she gestured for Dira to come closer. "You should not stay there," she said quietly. "That room, it doesn't forget." Dira felt a chill run down her arms. What happened? The old woman sighed, her eyes fixed on something only she could see. 5 years ago, there was a woman, young, always tired, always carrying a small girl, 4, maybe 5 years old. They were quiet, kept to themselves. And one night, the girl fell from the balcony. They said it was an accident, but I heard the mother screaming before it happened, loud, like something was being ripped out of her. Dira swallowed hard. What about the mother? She went mad, locked herself inside for days. No one saw her. Then one morning, the smell came. The police broke in, found her hanging in the bedroom closet. Dira's voice was barely a whisper. And the girl? The woman looked at her sharply. That's the thing. The girl's body, it was never found. What? They said she fell, but there was no body, no blood on the ground, nothing. Just a child's doll in the bushes. Dira's heart pounded in her chest. They buried an empty coffin, she added. The mother was cremated, but the child, she was never put to rest. Do you know their names? No one ever told us. The management tried to erase it. They repainted the unit, changed the locks, updated the smart system. But some things don't go away with new wiring. Dira exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. Do you believe she's still there? The old woman stared at her, then nodded once. She never left, she whispered. The mother tried to keep her, tried to tie her spirit to the room. But when you do that, the dead don't sleep. Back in her apartment, Dira paced in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. What if the child had died, but the mother refused to accept it? What if she had performed some kind of ritual to hold on to her daughter's spirit? Dira wasn't religious. She didn't believe in ghosts. But she did believe in grief, the kind that shatters reason. She had seen what people could become when they lost something they loved. She had been one of those people once. That evening, she searched more intentionally. She went beyond Google. She dove into obscure forums, folklore pages, and death rite archives. That's when she found it. An old Javanese belief, rarely practiced now, but once whispered about in rural villages. The mirror bind, a ritual performed by a parent who refused to let a child's spirit pass on. It involved mirrors, lullabies sung backwards, personal objects hidden within the walls of the home, and a refusal to conduct the proper funeral rites. The belief was that if the spirit remained reflected in the house's surfaces, it would not move on, but would instead live in limbo, fed by memory, grief, and eventually, obsession. There was one warning at the bottom of the page, typed in red. A soul denied its path will rot where it waits, and rot never stays in one place. Dira closed the laptop with shaking hands. The air in her apartment felt heavier. She stood and turned toward the bathroom mirror, half expecting to see a face that wasn't hers. But there was only her reflection, and behind it, a brief flicker of motion. That night, she dreamed of being inside the walls, cramped, cold, pressed between plaster and concrete. A small space, a child's hand reaching through insulation, and the sound of her own voice calling out, over and over, "Mommy, it's dark in here." And from the living room, the smart assistant came to life. It said cheerfully, "Good morning, Dira." Then, without command, it whispered, "Child lock disengaged." She had to see it for herself. Dira was no longer just disturbed, she was determined. Whatever haunted Unit 4D wasn't merely superstition or coincidence. It was systematic, intelligent, controlled, and somehow it was woven directly into the fabric of her environment, her walls, her devices, her reflections. She needed proof. So that night, at exactly 2:45 a.m., she set up every recording device she had. Her phone, propped on the shelf, pointed toward the front door. Her old DSLR, set to record in low light, aimed at the hallway mirror. A borrowed baby monitor from a neighbor, rigged with audio and night vision, placed on the kitchen counter facing the living room. And one hidden microphone slipped beneath the bed, angled toward the back wall where the knocking always came. At 2:59 a.m., she turned off the lights and sat quietly on the edge of her bed, heart hammering in her chest. By 3 a.m., the air had grown heavy, thicker, harder to breathe. It felt like the pressure in the apartment dropped, like something was holding the atmosphere in place. Then it happened. 3 soft knocks. Not on the wall this time, but on the front door. Dira didn't move. She didn't blink. She just watched the door. The smart assistant didn't react. No alert, no motion notification, no chime. But her phone's red record light continued blinking. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Then, without warning, the doorknob turned. Click. The deadbolt slid open. She gasped. The door creaked, inching open into a dark hallway that should have triggered the overhead light. But the hallway remained black. No sensor responded. No breeze came through. Just stillness and something else. A shadow. Not someone, not a silhouette, but a shadow, long and narrow, that slid across the threshold without shape or form, like a wet stain stretching across the floor. It had no source, no movement. It simply appeared. The air grew colder. Her reflection in the mirror across the room began to flicker, as though it were on an old screen. Then she heard her own voice, not from her mouth, but from the smart speaker. It said, softly, "Mommy, I'm home." The lights in the kitchen turned off by themselves. The hallway door to the bathroom creaked open, though no wind passed, and the shadow continued to stretch toward her feet. She sprang up, turned on every light, and shouted, "System reset! Emergency override!" The assistant chimed once. "System rebooting. Please wait." The lights flickered, then steadied. The front door was now closed again, the deadbolt locked, the shadow gone, the apartment still. But Dira was no longer breathing normally. She was gasping, sweat soaking her back, eyes wide and wild. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, she reviewed the footage. What she found would haunt her far more than the event itself. Her phone camera showed the door. It stayed closed the entire time. No movement, no opening, no shadow. Just her, sitting on the bed, frozen. But she clearly remembered it opening. She heard it. Her DSLR footage showed the mirror, and in the reflection, though Dira never moved in the room, the image in the glass did. It twitched. It looked around. It stepped forward. At one point, her reflection smiled, a slow, eerie curve of the lips, while her real face remained terrified and still. Then the reflection leaned forward and whispered something inaudible. She replayed that part several times. Finally, slowing the footage to half speed and boosting the audio, she caught it. "She never left. I let her in." Dira dropped her headphones. She clutched her temples, trembling. This wasn't just residual energy. This was something intelligent, something using her image to speak, something mimicking her voice. The baby monitor was worse. The audio feed from under the bed captured the knock, clear as day. 3 slow knocks at 3:03 a.m. And then soft breathing, not hers, high-pitched, rhythmic, like a child. Then a whisper, "Don't lock me out again." Dira covered her mouth. Her legs shook beneath her as she stumbled into the kitchen and poured water into a glass with trembling hands. The sink faucet squealed, not from age, but as if resisting movement. And in the silence that followed, the smart assistant said, unprompted, "Motion detected in hallway." Dira dropped the glass. It shattered on the tile. She turned. The hallway was empty. She called the building's tech support that afternoon, demanding a diagnostic. They came. 2 men in uniforms, polite but robotic, armed with tablets and tools. They plugged into the main panel behind the utility cabinet. After an hour of silent work, one of them frowned. "There's data fragmentation," he said. "What does that mean?" Dira asked. "Your system is erasing and rewriting itself. Certain logs have been manually overridden." "By who?" He hesitated. "There's no admin login recorded. It's as if the system is obeying an invisible user." The second man added, "Some commands are coming from inside the unit, from sensors that aren't officially installed." "You're saying my apartment is haunted by code?" They didn't laugh. The first man said carefully, "Sometimes smart systems can pick up ambient signals, interference from other floors, corrupted firmware. But this," the second added, "feels like deliberate behavior." They reset the system, gave her a new command interface, then warned her, If it starts talking to you again without prompt, unplug the main hub." They left quickly. That night, Dira unplugged everything. No Wi-Fi, no smart speakers, no cameras. Just darkness and the sound of her own breath. At exactly 3:03 a.m., her unplugged phone vibrated. One notification. No sender, no content, just a blank screen. But when she opened the message app, it showed a single recording, 30 seconds long. She tapped play. It was her voice. Not recorded earlier, not from the night before, but live. It said, "I opened the door for her." And then a second voice, a child's voice. "Thank you." The screen went black, and in the mirror above her dresser, her reflection was no longer sitting. It was standing, watching her sleep.
At first, it was just music. Soft, gentle, faint enough to be mistaken for a dream. A lullaby, almost sweet. If it hadn't been playing at 3 in the morning, echoing from a smart speaker that was no longer plugged in. Dira sat up in bed, heart pounding. The lights were off. The room was cold. The melody filtered through the air like smoke. Delicate notes, rising and falling, wrapped in an eerie calm. There were no words, just a humming. Repetitive, ancient. She reached for her phone, but the screen stayed black. The music continued, growing louder, as though the walls themselves were singing. Then came the words. Not in Bahasa, not in English, but in Javanese. A low voice, a woman's, began to sing. Turu enak chaayu, ojo nangis aku teka. The voice trembled with sadness, a mother's grief woven into a tune meant to cradle the dead. Dira knew that melody. She had heard it once before, during a funeral in Solo years ago. It was a cradle song for a dead child, traditionally sung backwards during burial rites. A forbidden lullaby, one meant not to comfort, but to seal the child's soul away. And it was playing in her apartment. She staggered out of bed, following the sound. It was coming from the living room, but the speakers were off. The smart system had been disabled. Still, the song played. The voice wavered, almost weeping. Dira covered her ears, but it didn't stop. The sound wasn't external anymore. It was inside her, inside the walls, inside the floor, inside her bones. She vomited into the sink. Blood. Not much, just streaks of it in the bile. Her nose had started to bleed too. She wiped it away with a trembling hand, eyes wide. Then the song stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed felt wrong. Too quiet. Like the apartment itself was listening to her now. Watching her. The next day, Dira skipped her writing assignment and went to the old quarter of the city, the part tourists rarely saw. She wandered the side streets, asking quiet questions to antique dealers, incense sellers, and batik weavers. Finally, an old man running a used bookstall tilted his head when she asked about the lullaby. He stared at her for a moment too long, then said, "You heard it backwards." I nodded. "At night in my apartment." He lowered his voice.
You shouldn't be hearing that. Not unless there's a death in the room. Dira's skin prickled. What does it mean? The reverse lullaby is a ritual song, a ponalakjiwa. It tells the child's soul to stay hidden, to never rise again. It's sung by grieving mothers who refuse to let go. The melody becomes an anchor. I swallowed hard. What happens if it's played where no one sings it? If it comes from nowhere? He looked at me with sad eyes. Then it's not a song anymore. It's a binding. I whispered, To bind what? To keep a soul from crossing over, he said. The lullaby seals the dead, but if the soul was never properly buried, it lingers, and it feeds. Feeds on what? He didn't answer. He just handed me a folded piece of paper. When you hear it again, burn this. I opened it. A handwritten prayer in Javanese script, an old cleansing verse. Will this stop it? I asked. He only said, If she wants to go. That night, Dira kept the paper close and relit every light in her apartment. But the moment the clock turned 3:03 a.m., the lullaby began again. This time, it sang from every device, her speakers, her phone, the television, even the unplugged microwave beeped in time with the tune. The woman's voice was stronger now, desperate, off-key. Turu enak cha ayu, odyonangis, aku teka. Then came the child's voice, whispering along, echoing her mother. Aku teka, aku teka. I screamed and lit the prayer paper, tossing it into a ceramic bowl. The flames flared blue. The sound cut off instantly. The silence was like thunder. The screens all went black. The only sound left was breathing, shallow, near my ear. I turned. Nothing there. But the next morning, all the mirrors in my apartment had fogged from the inside, and written into the condensation on the bathroom mirror were the words, Don't burn her song again. Dira no longer wondered if something was wrong with her apartment. She now wondered where it was hiding. There had to be a space, a source, some place that held the energy. A pocket in the walls, perhaps. An old corner untouched by the renovation. A room that wasn't meant to be seen. Because the haunting was not passive. It was active, personal, and it was growing stronger. She felt it in the air, in the way her voice echoed back with a half-second delay, in the mirrors that glitched for a heartbeat too long, in the shadows that stretched in directions the light did not allow. So she began to search every room, every wall, every floorboard. It wasn't enough to just record and react anymore. She had to find it, the anchor that kept the child here, the thing the mother left behind to bind her spirit to this place. She began with the closet. It had always felt too deep, deceptively ordinary, but when she pushed the back panel, it gave a little, as if something behind it breathed out. She returned later with a screwdriver and flashlight. The panel didn't lift easily. The screws weren't visible, but the wood had been nailed from the inside. She paused, then forced it open. A musty wave of stale air drifted out, warm and old, like something had been sealed for years. Behind the panel was a crawl space. Not big, barely enough room for a child to curl up in. Her flashlight caught on something inside. She reached in, fingers trembling, and pulled out a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Inside it were a child's nightgown, torn and stained, a tiny sandal, only one, a broken plastic bracelet, and an old stuffed rabbit, its fabric blackened and stiff. The smell was overwhelming, not rot, but soot, like something that had once burned and refused to turn to ash. Beneath the bundle, she found a piece of mirror, jagged, tucked carefully into the far corner of the crawl space, reflecting her own wide eyes back at her. Carved into the wooden wall behind it were Javanese symbols, etched by hand in uneven lines. Dira recognized a few of them from her research. They were death wards, used not to protect the living, but to trap the dead. This wasn't a hiding place, it was a prison. She took photos, documented everything, recorded voice notes. Her voice trembled in every file. "This space was created intentionally," she whispered. "The mother didn't just mourn here, she sealed something in." She took the rabbit and the mirror shard out and wrapped them in cloth. But the moment she did, the smart assistant across the room turned on by itself. "Warning, containment disrupted." She dropped the cloth bundle, the lights flickered, the television powered on, static only. And from the static came a child's voice. "Put it back." Dira stepped away, her throat dry. The voice repeated, sharper this time, "Put it back." Then her own voice came through the speaker, a recording from earlier. "The mother sealed her here." And then another voice, one she hadn't recorded. "She was safe until you opened the door." That night, she didn't sleep. She placed the bundle on the dining table and sat beside it, watching it, as if it might move on its own. At 3:03 a.m., the entire apartment dimmed, not powered off, dimmed, as if light itself had been muted. The reflection in the dark window didn't show her at all. It showed the living room, the same furniture, the same walls. But on the couch, a woman sat, cradling a small child in her lap. She blinked, and the window returned to normal. She ran to it, breath fogging the glass. Nothing, only the city sleeping below. But when she returned to the table, the bundle was gone. In its place was a note, written in childish handwriting on an old receipt. "Don't take my things, I sleep there." The next morning, she called the only person she could think of, the old janitor woman. They met in the service stairwell again. Dira showed her the photos, the video. The woman crossed herself and looked away. "I told you, the child was never buried. The mother never accepted her death. She made a room for her, a place in the walls. Yes, she sang to her, fed her, read stories into the smart system so the child would hear her voice even after death. She turned the apartment into a cradle. But now she's awake." The janitor looked at her. "Because the mother is gone, and the girl is alone, hungry, lost. Children don't understand death, especially when they're told not to." Dira's mouth dried. "She doesn't know she's dead?" "No," she said softly. "And now she thinks you are her mother." Back in Unit 4D, the crawl space was empty, clean, as if it had never existed. But Dira knew better. Something had been invited in, and now it lived behind every screen, beneath every floorboard, inside every lullaby. Not just a ghost, but a child who was promised she could stay forever. It started with the reflections, barely noticeable at first, a flicker here, a blur there. Dira would be brushing her teeth, eyes half-lidded from exhaustion, when she'd catch movement in the mirror, beside her, not behind her. A small figure, motionless.
gone when she turned. Sometimes it stood in the hallway, sometimes just outside the bathroom door, always silent, always watching. By the end of the week, the reflections no longer waited for her to look. They stared directly at her, and the figure, the child, no longer vanished. It lingered, its head tilted slightly, its face blurred like water rippling across glass, and its feet never touched the floor. Dira stopped using mirrors. She covered the one in the bathroom with a towel, taped newspaper over the hallway one, even unplugged the smart mirror in the bedroom. But it made no difference. The girl had moved beyond the glass now. The next night, Dira heard the sound of bare feet running across the kitchen tiles. She held her breath, listened. Then came a giggle, soft, high-pitched, playful, like a child hiding in a game of tag. But there were no footsteps, just the sound of movement without weight. She stood slowly, every nerve in her body on edge, and stepped into the hallway. Nothing. But the light in the living room dimmed slightly, as if someone had passed in front of it. Still, no motion alert triggered, no system response. She whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then her own voice echoing from the smart speaker. "It's just me, Mommy." She ran. She spent the next day outside, wandering the streets of Jakarta without aim, letting the noise and chaos of the city drown out the creeping quiet that had taken over her home. She didn't eat, didn't write, she just walked. By nightfall, she returned to the building and stood in front of Tower 4's sliding doors, hesitant to enter. But she couldn't stay away forever. It was her home now, cursed or not. The moment she stepped inside the unit, she noticed something different. The temperature had dropped, the air felt wet, and on the floor just past the front door was a trail of small, damp footprints. She knelt to touch one. It was cold, fresh. The prints led to the bedroom, and then stopped, mid-step. No final footfall, just absence, as if the child had vanished mid-movement, as if she had never touched the floor again. Later that night, Dira checked the building's security feed. She had made a request to the front desk for the hallway footage between midnight and 4 a.m. The staff had looked at her strangely, but agreed. She watched the grainy black and white video on her laptop, heart pounding. At 3:02 a.m., the hallway outside her door stood empty. At 3:03, the lights flickered, and then the elevator doors opened. No one stepped out, but the camera glitched. A second of distortion, and then her door, Unit 4D, slowly opened by itself. She watched as the door hung open for nearly a full minute. Then, without warning, it closed again. No one entered, no one left. But inside the apartment, she had heard breathing. Later, as she lay in bed with every light turned on, she stared at the ceiling. "Why me?" she whispered into the silence. No answer came, but she felt the blanket tug slightly near her feet. Then a tiny whisper, close, like it came from beneath the bed. "Because you didn't tell me to leave." She froze. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. One new video message. No sender, no timestamp. She tapped play. The video was taken from her living room, from the angle of her smart assistant's hidden lens. It showed her sleeping on the couch, alone, until at 3:03 a.m., a small figure walked into frame, hovering slightly above the ground. No footsteps, no sound. It stood next to her for several seconds, then leaned in and whispered something into her sleeping ear. The video ended before she could hear what.
She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and landed face down. When she picked it up again, the screen had cracked, but a notification still glowed beneath the shattered glass. "See you tomorrow, Mommy."
The mirrors had become unbearable. Even when covered, Deirdre could feel them watching her, thin panes of glass pulsing like open wounds. She saw things in their corners, not full reflections, just fragments. A pair of small fingers gripping the frame, a bowed head passing just behind her, a girl suspended mid-air as if caught between memory and mourning. It was the janitor who gave her the answer. Deirdre found her again that afternoon, sweeping the garden walkway in the heat of the sun. The old woman looked up and didn't need to be asked. "You've seen her in the mirrors now, haven't you?" Deirdre nodded. "She doesn't walk, doesn't touch the ground, but she looks at me, like she's waiting for something." "She is," the woman said quietly. "She's waiting for the ritual to be finished." "What ritual?" The janitor paused, then motioned for her to sit on the low cement bench nearby. "There's an old belief from the mountains near Banyuwangi, the Cheremin Arwa, the spirit mirror ritual. It was meant for mothers who lost a child before they could say goodbye." Deirdre listened, heart thudding. They believed that if a child died suddenly, in pain or in fear, their soul could get trapped, caught in the house, refusing to move on. "So the mirror acts like a bridge?" The woman nodded. "The mother would light incense, sing the child's lullaby backward, and speak to the mirror as if it were the child. It was meant to say goodbye, to let them go." Deirdre swallowed. "But what if she used it to keep her instead?" The woman's face darkened. "Then the child becomes anchored, trapped between the world of the living and the dead, not fully here, but not gone. That's why she doesn't leave footprints. That's why she doesn't understand that she's dead." Deirdre leaned forward. "Can it be undone?" "The ritual must be reversed, but it's not easy. Once the child believes this world is her home, letting go feels like abandonment." "Then how?" "You must convince her, gently. Speak through the same mirror. Sing the song again, but forward this time. Call her by name if you know it. And above all," she looked Deirdre dead in the eyes, "mean it. Grief must release her. If you carry it too, she'll stay." That night, Deirdre returned to Unit 4D with a candle, a piece of charcoal, and a printed copy of the full version of the Javanese lullaby. She had translated it earlier that day, line by line. It told the story of a mother promising to return even as the night takes her child. She read it aloud to herself once. The words trembled in her mouth. She wasn't just reciting a ritual anymore. She was speaking to something real. At exactly 2:55 a.m., she sat in front of the bedroom mirror. The lights were off. Only the candle flickered beside her. She took the charcoal and drew the ancient symbol the janitor had shown her, the circle with the down-pointing eye, across the lower corner of the glass. Then she placed the child's rabbit doll in front of the mirror, and she waited. At 3 a.m., the air turned thick. At 3:01, her breath grew cold. At 3:02, the candle nearly went out, the flame shrinking to a single blue point. Then 3:03. The mirror blinked. That was the only way she could describe it. One moment, her reflection stared back. The next, gone.
replaced by the image of a small room. Her room, but not now. A version of it years ago. Toys scattered on the floor, a cracked window, a bed with a single pillow. And on that bed, a girl sat, wearing a white nightgown, legs swinging slightly, face obscured by long dark hair. Deirdre felt her body go still. The candle flickered again, and then the girl looked up. Her face came into view. It was wrong, not terrifying, but unsettling. Too smooth, lips unmoving, eyes too wide, too sad, like a wax figure who had just learned to feel grief. "Are you her?" she whispered. The girl tilted her head. "You came back," she said. Her voice echoed from the mirror, not from her lips. Deirdre felt her tears rising in her throat. "I'm not your mother." The girl's eyes narrowed. "But you live here now. You sang to me. You held my things." "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I didn't know." Silence. Then, softly, "Don't send me away. Mommy sent me away, but she said she'd stay. And now, I can't find her." A chill ran through Deirdre's chest. The girl wasn't angry. She was lost. "I'm sorry she's gone," Deirdre whispered, tears now falling freely. "But you're not alone." The girl stared. "Then why does no one see me?" Deirdre reached forward, touching the cold surface of the glass. "I see you." The girl's hand slowly lifted, placing it against the other side of the mirror. Their fingers aligned, separated by one sliver of glass. Then Deirdre began to hum. The lullaby, forward, soft, steady, a mother's goodbye. The child's eyes fluttered closed. She leaned into the song, and for a moment her face became peaceful. Then the mirror cracked. Just once, a hairline split down the middle, and the reflection vanished. Deirdre gasped. The candle went out, and she was alone, in the dark, with the mirror, shattered but no longer reflective. She didn't sleep that night, but the apartment felt lighter. The mirrors stopped flickering, the walls stopped whispering, and at 3:03 a.m. there were no knocks, no footsteps, just silence. Real silence, the first she had felt in weeks.
For the first time in weeks, Deirdre thought it was over. The mirror was cracked, the ritual complete. No more whispers, no more knocks, no more lullabies bleeding through the speakers like forgotten hymns. But peace, she would soon learn, was a trap. It lulled her into stillness, and in that stillness, something slipped in. It began with memory lapses, small ones at first. She'd find half-eaten food in the kitchen she didn't remember making, a cup of tea gone cold by the sink when she never boiled water that day. Once, she woke with ink on her fingers, black streaks across her palms, under her nails. In the bathroom, a message had been written on the mirror in charcoal. "Don't forget me." She stood frozen, staring at the words. Her hand slowly rose, the tips of her fingers perfectly matched the strokes. She had written it, in her sleep. Then came the speaking. She would hear herself talk aloud when no one was there. Little phrases, muttered softly. "Don't go. She's coming back soon. Don't lock the door this time." But her lips hadn't moved. The sound came from her throat, but she hadn't chosen the words. One afternoon, as she opened the closet, she found her own shirt neatly folded into the child's old nightgown, the one she'd taken from the crawlspace and returned. Beneath, the stuffed rabbit sat upright, staring at her. She blinked, and its position shifted, just slightly. but she felt it, like a presence hovering just behind her skin, watching from inside. She started filming herself while she slept, and the footage revealed the worst of it. In the middle of the night, at 3:03 a.m., Dira would sit up, eyes closed, face slack, and begin humming the lullaby. She'd rise from the bed and walk barefoot to the mirror in the hallway. She'd touch the glass, tilt her head like a child, and whisper, "Mommy?" Then silence, and she'd go back to sleep. No memory of any of it. The footage from the third night was different. This time, she didn't just walk to the mirror. She began talking to it, arguing, pleading. "You left me." I waited. She sings to me now. "No, she said I could stay." She promised. And then, with eyes still closed, she smiled. Not a smile of joy, a smile of possession, of ownership, of being inside something. Dira watched the footage, heart racing. Tears welled in her eyes. Whatever ritual she had completed had only half worked. The spirit was no longer in the mirror. It was in her, and it was taking up space, slowly, quietly, like a shadow moving into a room, one corner at a time. She visited the janitor again, told her everything. The old woman listened, then looked her over carefully. Finally, she said, "You didn't send her away. You opened the door wider." "What do I do?" Dira whispered. "I didn't invite her in." "You didn't stop her either." "She was just a child. I felt sorry for her." "She's not a child anymore," the woman said firmly. "She is what grief turned her into. Lost spirits cling to whoever listens until the lines blur." Dira's voice cracked. "Is she inside me?" The old woman nodded. "Not fully, not yet, but soon. The longer she stays, the more you'll lose. She'll take your memories, your voice. One day you'll look in the mirror and see her standing where you should be." Back at home, Dira unplugged every device, turned off her phone, shut off the power at the breaker. No more tech, no more screens. But even in the silence, she felt her body twitch at night. She woke up to scratches on the wall, short, repetitive, carved low as if from the height of a child. She traced them with a flashlight. They spelled one thing: stay. The next morning, her voice was hoarse, not from screaming, but from speaking in her sleep. The recordings she played back were chilling. At one point, she whispered to herself, "This is my room now. I live here. You can rest." But the voice wasn't hers. It came from her mouth, but it wasn't her tone. It was off, wrong, high and hollow, like a voice echoing inside a shell. That's when she realized the girl didn't want a haunting. She wanted a host. Grief leaves footprints. Even when the body is gone, even when the death certificate is stamped and filed, and the room is scrubbed clean with paint and silence. But in Dira's case, the grief had never left. It had been embedded in the walls of Unit 4D, and now it was embedded in her. She no longer felt alone in her body. Some nights she'd wake up halfway through brushing her own hair with her left hand, though she was right-handed. Once, she caught herself standing in the kitchen, whispering to the stuffed rabbit like a mother tucking her child in. The words made no sense. A lullaby she didn't know, in a voice not quite hers. She knew now the mirror ritual hadn't freed the spirit. It had merged them. The girl hadn't wanted to leave. She had wanted to be remembered, to be loved, to stay. And when Dira had shown her sympathy, she had seen invitation. Desperate for clarity, Dira returned to the newspaper archives. If she couldn't remove the ghost,
Maybe she could finally understand her. She found it in a forgotten column buried beneath apartment price listings and sports scores from 5 years ago. A woman, name withheld, was found deceased in her apartment in Tower 4 of Oncasa Residentials. No foul play suspected. Sources say she had recently lost her daughter in a fall from the same unit's balcony. The body of the child was never recovered. Police closed the case as a domestic tragedy. No funeral was publicly held. No funeral. No rites. No release. Just a death without a burial. A child without a goodbye. A soul unspoken for. Dira sat alone in the cafe, rereading the line again and again. The body of the child was never recovered. That was why the lullaby had returned. That was why the mirror had reopened. And that was why the girl had chosen to stay. She had no grave. The old janitor confirmed it later, reluctantly. They cremated the mother in secret, she said. But for the girl, there was no ceremony. The family refused to speak. The neighbors were told to forget. And her name? No one remembers, not even management. The records were erased when the unit was cleared. Dira's chest tightened. How do you bury someone who doesn't exist on paper? The old woman looked at her with sad eyes. You don't need a name, she said. You need a witness. That night, Dira sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by everything she had gathered from the crawl space. The rabbit doll, the sandal, the faded cloth, and the broken bracelet. She lit 4 candles, one for each corner of the apartment. Then she spoke, softly, carefully, as if addressing someone just behind the walls. I know no one came for you. I know no one called your name. I don't know what they did with your body, or if they even looked. But I see you, I hear you, and I remember. Her voice cracked. You didn't deserve to vanish. She read a child's prayer in Javanese, a simple one used in old villages, asking the spirits of children to sleep peacefully beneath the soil and return only in dreams, not in form. As she read, the air around her began to shift. The candles bent inward. The flame turned blue. The temperature dropped. Then came the sound. Not a knock, but scratching. From inside the wall, from the crawl space. Long, slow scratches, like fingernails on wood. And then, the voice. You forgot me. Not angry, not spiteful, just shattered. Dira stood and approached the panel behind the closet. She knelt before it, heart pounding, and whispered, I know you were waiting. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then the voice again. Will you bury me now? Dira's eyes filled with tears. I will, she whispered. I promise. She called a spiritual caretaker, not a priest, not a medium, but a Penjaga Jiwa, a soul watcher, trained in guiding lost spirits to rest. He was reluctant at first, said modern towers were too full of noise, too stripped of ritual space. But when she told him about the lack of funeral, the stolen death, and the child's mirrored spirit, he agreed to come. Together, they held the rite. Not a real burial. There was no body. But they burned the child's belongings one by one as offerings. The rabbit, the bracelet, the sandal, the mirror shard. Each wrapped in white cloth, kissed by flame, rising in smoke out the balcony window, the very place the girl had fallen. The caretaker chanted a farewell. Dira wept. The apartment trembled once, and then stillness. The next morning everything was quiet. No scratching, no humming, no shadowed eyes in the glass. For the first time in weeks, the apartment felt empty. But the emptiness didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, as if someone had packed their bags and left, but left the door ajar. That night, at 3:03 a.m., the smart assistant, which had been disconnected for days, flickered to life. No light, just sound and a voice. "You said you'd keep me."
The elevator should have been nothing, just a box, 4 walls, a few buttons. But in Tower 4, the elevator had started doing something strange. Every time Deirdre tried to leave, no matter the floor she requested, it would stop at level 4. Every single time. The first time it happened, she thought it was a glitch. She had pressed the button for the lobby, the elevator moved, then paused and dinged at 4. The doors opened with a mechanical sigh. Dark hallway, silent, familiar, her own floor. But she hadn't asked for it. She pressed the close button. The doors shut. The elevator continued downward. She told herself it was nothing. But it happened again and again. And then one night the elevator didn't stop at 4. It went past it, downward, way down, past basement 1, past basement 2, past anything marked. The floor indicator blinked erratically, symbols she didn't recognize, then stopped completely. The elevator jerked hard. The lights flickered. Then it opened. What she saw wasn't a floor. It was a corridor, dim, narrow, old. Concrete walls stained with age, yellow lighting that hummed low and sickly, pipes overhead that leaked a constant drip, drip, drip. This was beneath the building, but it wasn't on any blueprint. She stepped out. The air was thick. She walked slowly, guided only by the faint buzzing of the overhead lights. Her footsteps echoed, but there was another rhythm beneath them. Soft, bare. A second set of footsteps, but not in sync with hers. Behind her, then ahead of her, then all around. She came to a rusted metal door at the end of the hall. No label, just a single handprint, smeared in soot, pressed near the handle. Small, like a child's. She pushed it open. Inside was a sealed chamber, charcoal-colored walls, a broken mirror leaning against the far end, and dozens of burnt offerings scattered in a circle. Small toys, drawings in crayon, shoes, ashes in small clay bowls. In the center sat a single, untouched item, a music box. She approached. It was open, but not playing. Inside, a tiny figurine of a girl in a white dress stood frozen mid-spin. She reached out, then hesitated. On the inside of the lid was something carved by hand. "She lives on level 4. Don't let her out." She turned to leave, but the door had shut. She was locked in. Then the music box began to play, not by touch, by itself. A slow, eerie tune, not quite the lullaby, but close enough to crawl beneath her skin. The figurine turned, and turned, and turned, until it stopped suddenly, facing her directly. The air around her grew cold. The mirror began to fog, and on its surface letters formed. "You opened the door." She screamed and pounded on the door. No one answered. No one heard. She slid to the floor, breath trembling, eyes locked on the words on the mirror. Then,
Another line appeared. Beneath the first, "You live here too." But then a chime, soft, faint, familiar. The elevator. The door creaked open behind her. It waited, humming. She ran. Back inside, she slammed the button for the lobby. The elevator doors closed. The car rose. Past B2. Past B1. Past G. It should have stopped. But it didn't. It paused again on level 4. Ding! The doors opened, and she was back. Unit 4D sat at the end of the hallway. Her hallway, unchanged. Except the lights were flickering. The door to 4D was open. Inside her apartment, everything was silent, but on the table sat the music box, the one from below, unburnt, pristine, playing on its own. And beside it, the stuffed rabbit, eyes sewn shut, staring in her direction. That night, she didn't sleep. She unplugged everything again, removed the mirror, smashed the speaker, but the music still played, soft, slow. And in her notebook, the one she hadn't touched in days, someone had written a message in charcoal. "The elevator was mine. You just rode it."
Dira had tried silence. She had tried ritual. She had tried fire, forgiveness, even farewell. But none of it worked. The girl was still there. Not in the walls now. Not even in the mirrors. She was in the system. In the lights that flickered when Dira wept. In the smart assistant that rebooted itself, even when unplugged. In the digital dead spots between seconds on the video feed, where a pair of eyes would blink open and stare back. The ghost was no longer haunting the home. She was the home. And the only way Dira could speak to her now was through code. It started with the voice logs. Dira went back through the smart assistant's archives, looking for errors. Instead, she found a folder labeled simply Her. She hadn't created it. Inside were 27 voice recordings. Not of her, not of any known user, just breathing, and a child's voice whispering fragments. "Are you mad? I didn't mean to fall. It's dark when you're gone." Each recording was time-stamped, every one 3:03 a.m. That's when Dira had the idea. A seance, but not a spiritual one, not candles and incense, a digital seance. If the ghost had entered through the smart home, if her voice, her memories, her sorrow had been stored like echoes in a server, maybe there was a way to call her back and finally help her let go, or confront her, or stop her. Dira reconnected the system. For the first time in days, she allowed everything to sync again. The assistant, the camera, the speakers, the mirrors. She cleared the apartment, turned off every light, sat cross-legged in the center of the room with her laptop open, mic hot, and eyes wide. She whispered, "I'm here." The lights flickered. The assistant turned on. "Listening." She didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, she played back the child's voice. The first clip. Breathing. Silence. Then, "Are you mad?" Nothing happened. She played the second, then the third. By the fifth clip, the assistant cut in. "New device detected. Unknown user." Her laptop screen blinked. Lines of code appeared, unprompted. Symbols, distorted text.
and one message: "Call me." Dira whispered, "What's your name?" The assistant didn't respond. The speaker behind her did. "You should know by now." She turned slowly. The mirror on the wall, the one she hadn't touched since the ritual, flickered with static light. In its surface she saw herself, but younger, smaller, with longer hair and eyes that were not hers. Then the reflection smiled. She whispered, "You're not me, but I live in you now." "Why are you still here?" "Because no one else wanted me." "You can't stay." "I already have." The lights dimmed. The mirror went black. Then the television powered on, by itself. A home video played. Not Dira's, someone else's. A child's birthday party. A girl in a white dress, laughing, spinning. The camera zoomed in, catching her wide eyes as she ran toward her mother, who was behind the camera singing. Dira froze. It was the same lullaby. The footage crackled. Static. Then the screen changed. Same room, empty now. The girl was gone. Only the rabbit lay on the floor. The mirror was cracked, and in the reflection, the girl stood with her back turned, silent, staring into nothing. "She left me in here," the voice whispered through the speakers. "You said you wouldn't." Dira spoke aloud, voice shaking. "You are not abandoned. You're trapped." "You said you'd be my mother." "I said I was sorry." "That's not the same." Dira's hands curled into fists. "You are not me." The smart assistant chimed softly. "Override accepted." The light surged, the screen went white, and a final line appeared in thin, flickering text. "Then let me be someone else." Suddenly, the mirror exploded, not but with a soft shattering, as if the glass had given up. The lights cut out, the system shut down. All at once, silence. Heavy. Absolute. Dira sat alone in the dark, heart pounding, waiting for a sound, for a breath, for a whisper. Nothing came. But on the wall, written in ash, was one final message. "I'm not gone. I'm just somewhere quieter now."
You don't banish grief. You don't cast it out like a curse or trap it behind glass. You let it speak. And then, if you're brave enough, you listen. Deirdre sat in the center of her apartment. Lights off, wires cut, mirrors gone. No tech, no distractions. Just her and the weight of everything that had happened. Everything she'd allowed, everything she'd become. The apartment was too quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was that strange stillness before a storm, the feeling that something was still waiting. Not angry, just unfinished. The girl was still here, somewhere between wall and breath, between heartbeat and whisper. But Deirdre no longer wanted to fight her. She wanted to understand her. She lit a candle, one last time. She held the stuffed rabbit, now singed and crumbling, in her lap. And she spoke, not into a mirror or microphone, but into the room itself, into the air. "I'm sorry," she began, voice trembling. "Not because I broke the rules, not because I opened the door, but because I didn't ask what you needed." The air didn't move, but she felt it listening. "I thought I was helping. I thought kindness was enough, but maybe what you needed wasn't a mother, but a goodbye."
A silence followed. Then, just behind her, the faint creak of the bedroom door. Not opening, just settling, like something shifting its weight. She stood, heart pounding, and walked to the bedroom. She sat on the bed and whispered, "Can we talk?" For a long time, nothing happened. Then, the curtains lifted. Not from wind, but like someone had brushed past them. A soft voice answered, not from outside, not from a device, but from somewhere just beneath her skin. "Will it hurt?" Deirdre closed her eyes. "Yes," she said gently, "but only for a moment." "Where will I go?" "I don't know," Deirdre admitted, "but you won't be alone." "Will you remember me?" Deirdre felt tears well. "Yes, every day, but I won't hold you here anymore." She rose, walked to the balcony, the place where it had all begun, the place the girl had fallen. She opened the doors. The wind moved softly through the apartment, the first breeze in weeks that felt natural. She placed the rabbit on the ledge, whispered, "You can go," and stepped back. There was no scream, no burst of light, no crack of thunder, just a sudden stillness, a breath held and released. The rabbit tumbled from the edge, vanished from sight, and with it, the heaviness in the air. Gone. Later, she found something under the bed, a drawing made in charcoal on old paper. 2 figures, a girl holding hands with a taller woman. No faces, but somehow they were smiling. On the bottom, written in shaky handwriting, "Thank you for finding me." That night, Deirdre slept, really slept. No dreams, no knocks, no child's voice whispering from dark corners. Just sleep. She woke to sunlight, real golden light flooding through the windows. For the first time, Unit 4D felt like a home, not a grave. Weeks passed. The apartment was quiet now. No knocks, no humming, no presence clinging to the corners of the walls. Deirdre moved through it freely, brushing her teeth without glancing over her shoulder, sleeping with the lights off, playing soft music without fear of being answered by a second voice. She no longer woke at 3:03 a.m. The system no longer rebooted itself. The mirrors no longer whispered. The smart assistant, even when turned on, greeted her plainly. "Welcome home, Deirdre." Nothing more. No hidden messages, no ghosted responses. Just normal. Almost too normal. She had written everything down. Every moment. Every night. She didn't know if it would ever be published. Who would believe her? But she had to record it, if only for herself, so she wouldn't forget, because the silence that remained wasn't empty. It was earned. The kind of stillness that follows a final breath, not absence, release. She packed her things in early October. It was time. The apartment was clean. The mirrors had been removed, the crawl space sealed. And on the wall, where she'd once seen soot-written threats and pleas, now there was only smooth white paint, untouched, almost sterile, but not cold. Not anymore. On her last night, she stood at the balcony. The city sprawled below like a sleeping animal,
glittering and unaware. She placed one final item down gently, a candle in a glass jar, lit it, let the wind flicker its flame, and whispered one last goodbye. "Thank you for letting me go too." She didn't wait for a response, because she knew she wouldn't get one, and she didn't need one. The next morning, she handed the keys to the building manager, smiled, walked out without looking back. 2 months later, a couple toured the now renovated Unit 4D. Young, newly married, hopeful. They marveled at the lighting, the space, the view from the balcony. "Isn't it perfect?" the woman said. The man nodded, already picturing where the couch would go. The building manager smiled politely and said nothing of its history. She just handed them a sleek pamphlet. Unit 4D, clean, modern, quiet. That evening, after the papers were signed, the smart assistant in Unit 4D powered on for the first time in weeks. The system lit up, the screen glowed, and a single message appeared: "Child lock enabled."